Good evening and welcome to Colorado Decides, a joint production of Colorado Public Television and CBS 4. I'm your host, Jim Beneman. Joining me tonight on the panel, Eric Sonderman, political analyst with SC2. Tonight, continuing our series of debates, although this will be more of a discussion, featuring the races and issues that will be decided on November 2nd. Our debate tonight features the congressional race in the 4th Congressional District. However, only one of the two major party candidates did accept our invitation to be part of this debate. The Republican challenger for that seat, he's Cory Gardner. The Democratic incumbent, Betsy Markey, declined our invitation due to the fact that her two other opponents, Ken Wasco and Doug Aden, were not invited to participate because they did not reach our participation criteria. Now, the race in the 4th Congressional District is attracting national attention, so we've decided to move forward with the discussion with only one participant. The 4th Congressional, made up of the north and eastern parts of Colorado, including some good-sized cities, of course, Fort Collins, Greeley, and the Eastern Plains. Betsy Markey was elected back in 2008, replacing Marilyn Musgrave. Eric, with those details out of the way, let's get right to it. Your first question.
Well, there is an irony here, Cory, which is that 2 years ago, I recall sitting here and Betsy Markey was debating an empty chair because Marilyn Musgrave refused to debate her. I think this is pretty good omen maybe for the challenger. Can we just talk about the fact that there is an empty chair here? I take it that this is not the only debate that Betsy has chosen to pass on. How many of these have you been doing?
Well, there's been a number of them, and debates really are a very important part of the political process. It's a great tradition in this country to talk about ideas and to really justify why you believe you deserve to be elected or why you deserve to be re-elected. And in this case, I think it's very important that the voters of the 4th Congressional District get to have that opportunity to ask tough questions of both candidates, including questions to the incumbent member of Congress, why she voted for the health care bill, why she voted for the national energy tax, why did she vote for the failed stimulus package. Those are tough questions that she needs to justify to the voters, but because of her unwillingness to debate, those are questions that will remain unanswered.
To some people it might sound magnanimous. Look, if everybody can't be part of it, Cory, I don't want to be part of it. But Channel 12 has some very specific guidelines. If you're not polling at least what most would consider a pretty minimal amount, 5%, you would not be invited to participate. Well, so she might say, I want everybody to be included, or do you think she's hiding?
Well, again, I think it's typical of somebody from Washington, D.C. to want to change the rules of the game, to come in and tell somebody else how to run their show. But that's not Colorado. In Colorado, the public deserves an opportunity to hear from their candidates. The Fort Collins Coloradoan, after she decided to cancel and try to change the rules unsuccessfully in Fort Collins, she said that the Fort Collins newspaper editorialized that it was a political decision and not out of the goodness of her heart. And in fact, I believe there is legislation that she has co-sponsored as a member of Congress that would provide public funding to candidates only if and after they met a certain threshold. So clearly it's politics. But again, the people of this district understand what's going on. They want to know what her answer is to the record that she has.
Let's talk about the fact, do you think she's out of touch on the fact that the public wants to hear from the candidates during a debate? What issue that she has faced in her short time in Congress has she shown herself, in your view, to be most out of touch with the 4th District?
Well, I'm running for Congress because I believe we've got to end the wasteful disregard of the taxpayer dollars.
So is that it? Is that where she's been most out of?
And I believe that she has been out of touch in the rate of growth in government that she has allowed. Her philosophy seems to be more of one, don't just stand there, spin something, as Mitch Daniels said. It seems to be a government solution with government takeovers. And so her answers, unfortunately, have been more spending, more government, and not listening to the people of the 4th Congressional District.
If the Republicans are successful not only in picking up this district, but in picking up, what's the number, 42, or what's the number needed for majority?
39, 40 votes, 30 seats.
39. 42 is the number because I think they might lose a few in Hawaii or Louisiana or whatever. Anyway, Republicans are successful in regaining control of Congress. How is a new Republican Congress with you as a member going to be different than the past Republican Congress early part of this decade, which certainly gained a reputation of being institution that liked its own spending?
We must never let go of our first principles. Those first principles of limited government, fiscal responsibility, and that when we send somebody to Washington, D.C., we send them there to represent the people of the 4th Congressional District and the Constitution of this country. Like I said, I'm running for Congress to cut spending, to get government out of the way, and to let America America work. And those are ideals that we never can let go. We've always got to be fighting for those principles of less spending, a balanced budget, reining in the growth of government that we've seen. We've got to get this economy back on track. We've got to start creating jobs in this nation once again. My wife and I have a almost 7-year-old daughter, and I want to make sure that she has the same kinds of opportunities that we have all been blessed with.
Would you suggest, if I can just follow up, that the Denny Haster, Tom DeLay, Dick Armey Congress necessarily abided by those principles you're talking about?
I think what happened, if you look at what happened in 1994, they strayed from principles. The Republican Congress spent too much money. The Democrat Congress spent too much money. What happened 10 years ago is unacceptable. What's happened over the past 3 years is unforgivable. That's why I am running on a platform that actually will make a difference for this country, a platform that will return to economic prosperity, rein in the spending, lower our deficits, reduce the debt, and make sure that we're doing the right things for the people of this country, not just today, but tomorrow and the future.
Even some conservative columnists, some conservative economists, you say, you know, some stimulus, a good idea. Some of this, a good idea, but just went overboard. If you could, would you say that there is any need for any further stimulus, any targeted spending, federal spending, to jumpstart jobs in, say, the 4th District?
Bailouts and more money from the federal government is not the answer. We will not spend our way out of this economic downturn. I would not support additional spending programs that simply drive this country further into debt.
Any tax breaks, say, pointed at small business. Who does the hiring, and is there anything the government should be doing to help them out?
Small businesses are the backbone of this country. If you look at the statistics, more than 2/3 of the jobs, the businesses in this country are small businesses. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Businesses and the United States Chamber of Commerce, made up of small businesses around the country. And so if you look at some of the most important issues coming up dealing with taxes, let's talk about January, when taxes may increase on businesses and Coloradans and Americans all over. We're talking some pretty significant damage that could be done to this economy if the tax cuts are not extended in January. In fact, in the 4th Congressional District alone, studies have shown that if the taxes are allowed to increase in January, we could lose as many as 1,800 jobs a year just in the 4th Congressional District.
Do you think that some of the Democrats themselves are starting to back away from allowing all the tax cuts to expire because it's good politics or because it's good fiscal policy?
Well, clearly they've backed away. I mean, if you look at the evacuation from Washington, D.C. At the end of September, instead of actually getting the job of the people done, that's exactly what they did. It was a political decision that they couldn't continue any further, so they would come back and deal with it after the election. But if you look at the business they left undone, it's absolutely irresponsible. They evacuated Washington, D.C. before they gave businesses and families around this country the certainty that their taxes will not increase in January. They left Washington, D.C. for the first time in modern history without completing and finalizing a budget for this country. They're afraid to show the numbers. They're afraid to show how much is getting spent in this country, and so they kicked the budget down the road. It's the first time that's happened since modern-day budgeting procedures were put in place.
Let me talk about one tax in specific, Cory. What some people call the estate tax or inheritance tax, or in the political world, some people even call it a death tax. We're in this crazy year where I think the tax is 0 for 1 year, and then all of a sudden on January 1st it reverts to 55%. Sitting on a district that you hope to represent, a lot of farms, ranches, what have you, how does that policy affect your district, and what would your approach be there?
Well, my opponent has actually voted to continue the death tax, and I believe the death tax ought to be eliminated. It's one of the most punitive forms of taxation that you could develop. You've paid taxes your entire life on what you've built, your investments, and then when you die, only the government can come in and say that's a taxable event. It prevents families from passing on the hard work that they have built their lives on from one generation to the next. I speak to farmers and ranchers on a daily basis, people in Weld County, people in Yuma County, people in Baca County, who aren't going to be able to pass their farm on to the next generation because they're going to be hit with a very onerous tax, the death tax. I believe it needs to be eliminated.
So you take it all the way to 0, and
yes,
regardless of, not just with a $3 million exemption, but with no exemption
all the way to
whatsoever.
0. Again, people have already paid taxes their entire life. And it's unfair simply because somebody dies. Only Congress can make that a taxable event.
And a lot of people were joking, that's why George Steinbrenner decided to pass away this year. So the government would not get the $400 or $500 million
Right.
he would owe them next year. Let's talk, Cory, a little bit about talking about the farm life. And I know that your family has a rich agricultural history in Yuma County, the farm, and you've been getting some subsidies over the years.
Well, actually, I never have.
You haven't, but I know
right,
the farm is.
right.
You're not actively involved in the
Right.
farm, but the farm itself, even though it's burned by father and grandfather, is that one area of spending that you see could be pulled back? Do you favor a more maybe a market-based insurance approach to helping farmers? What can we do in that area?
Yeah, and I look forward to talking with people like the Colorado Farm Bureau who have developed different ideas, different approaches. But agriculture is the lifeblood of this state. If you look at places like Weld County is one of the top 10 agricultural producing counties in this country. In fact, I think it's the only non-California county that makes it into the top list, the top 10 list nationwide. We must make sure that we have a strong and vibrant agricultural system, not only in Colorado, but for the sake of our country. I would hate to think of a country that gets as much of its food from overseas as we do our oil from overseas. We've got to make sure we retain a strong and vibrant agriculture. And that means trade. How do we help increase agricultural productivity in the state? By opening new avenues of trade. And that goes back to jobs as well. If we were to increase trade simply by 1%, we could create 250,000 jobs in this country.
But if I could pull you back to the subsidies, in terms of need-based, is too much money, too much federal money going towards them? Are there other ways, perhaps, as you've talked about, maybe a more market-based approach to help farmers who need that type of
well, and again,
subsidization?
that's why I continue to talk to people like the Colorado Farm Bureau, those people who understand it best, to know what we need to do for a sound safety net in agriculture and make sure we have a sound food policy for this country.
Okay.
Your part of the state, your neck of the woods, Eastern Plains, particularly Yuma County, I think is home to a fair amount of wind energy. As a potential congressperson here, talk about renewable energy, what role the federal government should legitimately have in incentivizing such energy, and where you'd be on big picture energy policy.
Yeah, we do have a little bit of wind out there. In fact, when I was growing up, if we'd get a snowstorm, I remember my granddad always telling me, sometimes the snow doesn't melt here, it just kind of wears out.
Yeah.
And so we do get a lot of wind, and it's a great place to have opportunities for alternative energy. Yuma County at one point in the past couple of years was the third highest in applications for permits to drill for natural gas. But it also has tremendous opportunities in alternative energy, wind being a perfect example. At the state legislature, as a state representative, I've worked hard to make sure that we're putting in place policies that will continue to grow opportunities for farmers, ranchers, and others who want to be involved in alternative energy. For instance, I passed the Colorado Clean Energy Development Authority. The idea being to bring in private dollars to match where a project was needed for alternative energy, whether it was a transmission line to get the power from point A to B, or manufacturing a wind turbine equipment. I've also worked on legislation to help streamline the permitting process for the storage of biofuels. And so there's a lot of things that the government can do to get out of the way, to make it easier to develop market-based solutions. And I think one of the things that I'm most excited about, of course, is the opportunity that renewable energy, alternative energy, and traditional energy, the opportunity that it presents to not only keep generations of existing families in rural Colorado, but to attract new generations of families to the plains.
And what do you think of government mandates, whether it's at the state level or at the federal level,